Please welcome Luciano Resende and Felipe Barros, who will talk about an AI development workspace based on Jupyter Notebooks.
Hey. Thank you. Good afternoon. Sorry for the delay. I think it's the jet lag. Brain is sort of like slow a little bit. For those that are here today, I'm going to be talking about Elyra. Elyra, sort of like an AI development workspace based on Jupyter Notebooks. Just to get a show of hand, like who has used it or heard about Elyra in the past? OK, a few folks. Great, great. For those that haven't looked into Elyra, so when we start building large models, or probably start working with notebooks with large amount of data, adding scripts and things that don't fit kind of like in a processing way in the scope of your notebook and with the resources that you have, we were having a lot of these issues a few years ago, and it's kind of like a why we started working with Elyra. On top of that, I mean, I don't know if you guys have done model development in the past. You guys know it's very easy, right? So you start with creating some scripts in a VI or a text editor, and then Jupyter for kind of like interactively analyzing the data, building the model. Then you go PyCharm, and you name it. When you wanted to productionalize, you need to learn Airflow or Kubeflow, build your DAG. It's very, very easy to do, right? So it becomes a wild, wild west. Not only that, not only the set of tools or the amount of like different environments that you have to go, but also you don't have the capacity for a lot of these use cases to build, run, and do things directly into your laptop. So in that sense, when you need to run and when you need to schedule, how do you start leveraging resources from cloud providers, for example, or let's say you want to train a model, it runs for, I don't know, 7 hours, maybe 7 days. You don't want to have your laptop open and waiting for that to train your model on the notebook. So you want to offset, run that sort of like in a batch way. Things like submitting and scheduling that on Airflow or Kubeflow. All of those tasks that it's needed for productionalizing a model, it starts getting very complicated. Not only that, but building those models, what you start seeing is that your notebooks start getting very big. It's very hard to then maintain, run, and know the right order, or how do you, I mean, the data didn't change, you just want to retrain the model or check some other things. How do you know the right things to run? So it starts getting very complicated. Also, there are areas that it's easier if you do with pandas. Others, you maybe want to use a different API, a different thing like just run Spark, or as we are seeing in the previous talk, like use Dask, or use some kind of things that is the best option for that portion of the notebook, but not necessarily for all of them. So how you start decomposing, how you start doing that. And then we were also looking into where should we start making this kind of like a deep place for you to work on. And when we look into some of kind of like popularity of kind of like the IDs or the tools that we're using, we saw that basically Jupyter Lab, or Jupyter Notebooks in general, was far ahead, the most used one for data science and AI. We also look like the kind of like a second, kind of far second one, Visual VS Code, mostly assuming that those are people that are coming from data engineering, already has kind of like a facility, has been using that for data engineering, and they start trying to do data science there as well. So based on that, and based on these surveys, we said, OK, let's try to address some of these gaps. Let's try to bring something that really help the data science, the AI engineer to be productive, and have a one workspace that they can start helping and developing their models in a much more easy way, and as possible, hide a lot of like the DevOps and all of those things that not necessarily contribute to resolving the problem at hand for the data scientist. So what is Elyra then? Elyra, when we kind of like, as a definition, we basically say that Elyra is a set of AI-centric extensions for Jupyter Lab, and it aims to help data scientists, machine learning engineers, and AI developers through the model development lifecycle complexities. A lot of people also ask me, but what is this name, Elyra, where it comes from? So if you guys know, Jupyter has a lot of moons around it. One of the moons is Elyra, and we kind of like use the same kind of like a wordplay. Jupyter has the Y, we had the Y in Elyra, and that's how we came with that. Even though we are talking about Elyra, a new project, just a few years old, Elyra is built on top of open source. So Elyra builds on top of Jupyter Lab. Elyra builds on top of like things that we also implemented on Jupyter Enterprise Gateway. So a lot of the code that is there is not kind of necessarily new code, so it's stable code. We have been using that in production for a while. So, and we then, on top of those open source and tools or that you have been using for a while, we then added extensions to Jupyter Lab, extensions to Jupyter Server to kind of bring all of the solution for some of these gaps there. So what we do in Jupyter, in Elyra. Well, Elyra is built on Jupyter Lab. So all the good things that you have in Jupyter Lab, you also will have that because Elyra builds on top of Jupyter Lab. So the editors, ability to do the Jupyter Lab debug, the table of contents for navigating notebooks. We also enhanced that for navigating what we call the script editors as well. You can use simple interface mode and all the things that are coming in Jupyter Lab and will come in Jupyter Lab 4. We start integrating and making sure Elyra plays well together with all of that. On top of that, we start bringing a lot of like additional capabilities. One of the things is, in order for you to be able to kind of like decouple your notebook, refactor that into multiple notebooks, and start building pipelines, we have a pipeline visual editor. It's really kind of like a visual code, like a low code, no code, where you can drag and drop, set some properties, and then you can execute that in local mode or in remote runtimes. We also have the script editors that allows you to kind of like build scripts, test that in the environment of like a kernel, for example. So if you have a Python script, you can edit the Python script and you can execute the Python script there. Things that you see a lot in IDEs, like a refactoring, find where this is used, and things like that. With integration with LSP, you also start having a lot of those capabilities inside Jupyter Lab as well. We created a reusable code snippets extension as well, so that you can kind of like get codes that you use very often and put there, and integrated with Git as well, so you can start excuse me, sharing and versioning those codes, those notebooks, etc. And more recently, we have looked into enhancing a lot of the integration on the pipeline editor, particularly with runtime-specific pipelines, where, for example, if you know you're going to be running these on Airflow, if you know you're going to be running these on Kubeflow, we allow you to start incorporating things that are specific to that runtime. So if you have like an Airflow, you have operators that you have created or similar things in Kubeflow, we then start, we can pre-compile that and make those available in the pipeline editor. We also kind of like, I mentioned the runtime-specific components, but also the ability to isolate runtimes. So if you only have in your deployment or your environment Airflow versus Kubeflow and things like that, you can say, okay, just enable that one runtime into my pipeline deployment. But having said that, I've talked too much. Let's go into a demo. The demo scenario is going to be a very familiar thing to you guys, unless you're afraid of heights and don't fly at all. I'm sure you have been delayed into an airport. So it should be very familiar with the scenario that we're going to use for the demo. With that, I called Felipe here that he's going to be presenting to you guys. Let's make sure we can get.
Okay. Hello, my name is Felipe, and I will be doing the demo for Elyra today. For those using Jupyter Notebooks, this is just a regular Jupyter Lab interface. As you can see here in the third row, we have the Elyra extensions. Such extensions include generic Kubeflow and Airflow pipeline editors, as well as Python, Scala, and R editors. So for our demo today, we're going to be going over a scenario that should be familiar to most, or if not all of you. As I'm assuming you have flown here, I've flown before, and have had experienced some sort of flight delay. Today, the demo, we will build a model to predict flight delays based on weather features. In this notebook, we analyze data from JFK flights, and as well as weather information from the NOAA weather database. But as I scroll through, you can see as throughout the process of building this notebook, the notebook became too large, or a lot of information and too hard to maintain. So for our goal, we would like to simplify and refactor this notebook into something, to smaller ones, which we would then be able to execute and build our pipeline with these smaller notebooks. So let me move. Okay, there we go. As you can see here on the left side, I have already done that refactoring, and I already simplified certain sections from our larger notebook into smaller sections, which we can then use to create our pipeline, which I will open up right now. So when creating a pipeline, if you're creating it from scratch, it's as simple as just dragging and dropping, as I'm going to demonstrate here. When you drag and drop, you can then right-click to open the properties of that certain node. Certain properties we have include inputs, outputs, environment variables, and etc. We also recently added pipeline properties that are constant throughout the entire pipeline. We have node defaults where you can set the runtime for all nodes in this current pipeline just to make sure it's consistent throughout. I'm going to delete these two. So when you're ready to run your pipeline, it's as simple as going, let me switch that. It's as simple as going up here on the toolbar. You'll see the run pipeline. It should be the second option. I'm going to run it while I continue to explain our runtime features. When we configure how we would like the runtime platforms to operate, such as running locally, or running in a supported runtime platform, such as currently we have Airflow and Kubeflow. When running locally, it's almost the same as going through each of the cells in the notebooks and executing them from there. When running on external runtimes, Elyra will do all the magic to properly make sure the pipeline is running correctly, such as we package, we also we generate the pipeline, we add inputs and outputs and environment variables, as well as any other properties so it correctly runs on your designated runtime. And I think it should have been done now. I'm going to give it back to Luciano.
Thank you. As you can see, creating pipelines very easily, dragging and drop, setting some properties. You can then execute that in the different runtimes. Everything very kind of like abstracted in terms of like any DevOps. You don't see that you have to create a pipeline or like let's say Airflow, learn how to build a DAG. Everything is done for you from the runtime based on what we support. We also have a few additional extensions that we provide. He mentioned about the editors and things like that. And for example, when you open here, it's actually the editor. You can edit those files, but you also have the ability to run here. And depending on how you have your kernel set up, you run locally, you run remotely, depending on where you are. OK, let's see if I can go back to my slides. OK, another thing that I want to make sure, Elyra is an open source project. It's run by the community, it's developed by the community, and we also recently joined the Linux Foundation AI and Data. If you want to contribute to Elyra, we have sort of like some issues that we flagged as help wanted or good first issues. Those are very good for you to get started into the project. And then also you can join our community dev meetings. We meet every Thursday, 9 a.m. PST. But depending on where you're meeting, if you want to chat with us, we can, depending on like time zones and things like that, we can adjust the time to be more friendly for Asia and European people. Some suggestions of items to look at here. And a lot of the resources if you just want to get started. Having said that, I think we have a few minutes. If you guys have questions, any areas that maybe you want a little bit more details or anything like that, please let us know. We are here for help you and make sure that you get the best from the talk.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Hello, thanks for your project. And my question is how extensible Elyra is for different runners. For example, I use Argo on Kubernetes. How hard would it be to add this?
Yeah, so the question is how we would go about adding Argo. Is that the question?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think I have some community members that have looked into that and I actually added, but didn't contribute back. The other thing is, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Kubeflow have the option to run on top of Argo. So one of the capabilities that we have is that you can actually build a pipeline and then export. For Kubeflow, I think you have two options. One is export as kind of like a DSL, or export as the actual Argo that is submitted to or generated by the Kubeflow compiler. So to that extent, if you could leverage that to actually execute your Argo pipeline, the tool could be used to build the flow, and then when you export, you can then run to Argo. Or if Airflow, if Kubeflow is running on top of your Argo or front-ending your Argo, that might be an option. But if you really want a kind of like a vanilla Argo support, talk to us. We have the ability to kind of like bring your own runtime, and that can be a good option to do it.
Thanks. And a follow-up, do you package those notebooks as Docker live? Or?
So you saw that you have a property to select the Docker image that you want the environment. We will inject the notebook there, and we will inject anything that is needed to run the notebook. So we do the packaging, we generate the pipeline. When we generate, we set which environments, Docker images. And then at runtime, we inject the notebooks, the dependencies. Like, for example, if you have files that needs to be kind of like propagated from one node to another. And then we use some S3 to do some of those. So we make it get there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think we have time for another question. No? I have another question. So if you have a pipeline and there's an error, where would you see the error? Is it in the notebook or is it in the pipeline interface?
So depending on where you're running, so if you're running, for example, in local mode, you will see that it failed, and you will see the notebook. You will have like the output on the notebook. If you are running on external runtimes like Airflow or Kubeflow, they have sort of like their logs where some of the information will be there. We also, because we are executing the notebook, if you get the executed notebook that we provided as a notebook or as an HTML that you can download, you will see the error similar to like if you're running locally where you have the red tag explaining what failed on that cell of the notebook.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.